A fevered body, relentless pain, a stench so thick it clung to the air of the royal chambers. After his death, his corpse lay in the sweltering Babylonian heat, its preservation convincing many he was more than mortal. This was the horrible end of one of history's most unstoppable conquerors. Today, we reveal the true story of the death of Alexander the Great, a tale so haunting that it is rarely told in all its unsettling detail. Alexander was born in July 356 BCE in Pella, the capital of Macedon. When he inherited the throne at just 20, he was already famed for his striking appearance. Lean, muscular, with sharp features and a confident gaze said to carry the force of command. Ancient writers claimed he carried himself like one destined for divinity, a man who could ride into battle and sway armies with a look. Alexander's rise began almost the moment he took the throne. Within 2 years, he had crushed revolts in Greece, razed Pella to the ground, and set across the Hellespont with an army that would carry him far beyond the limits of the known world. At the Granicus River at Issus, at Gaugamela, he faced armies many times his own number, yet broke them with a combination of speed, precision, and sheer will. By the time he entered Babylon in 331 BCE, the Achaemenid Empire, the greatest power of the age, lay at his feet, and its king was a fugitive. The conquests did not stop there. He marched into the mountains of Bactria, crossed the Hindu Kush, and fought his way to the Hyphus River in India. Cities rose bearing his name, kings knelt before him, and entire peoples were folded into the empire. Ancient accounts speak of his boundless stamina, marching alongside his men, sharing their rations, and leading charges himself. He seemed untouchable, a figure half in this world and half in the realm of the gods, a man who remade the map of the world before he was 33. How, then, did this embodiment of vitality and ambition end up dying helpless in a bedchamber, surrounded by the stifling heat of Babylon? The turning point came in late May 323 BCE, after a banquet at the house of his friend, Medius of Larissa. Alexander, whose constitution had withstood years of war, long marches, and wounds that would have killed lesser men, suddenly developed searing abdominal pain and a fever that refused to break. By the following day, the illness had tightened its grip. Ancient accounts agree he could barely stand without help. Some say he was carried to his bed and never left it again. Whether the cause was an infection, poisoning, or a rare neurological disorder is still debated. But from that night forward, the man who had crushed empires could no longer even lift a sword. The illness also marked a shift in his presence and authority. In the days before, he had been making plans for new campaigns into Arabia, mapping routes with the precision of a man certain of his future. Now he could only watch as his generals gathered in whispered knots around the edges of his chamber. Some ancient sources claimed he continued to issue orders in a faint voice. Others insist he communicated only with nods and hand gestures. Each day, his condition worsened. His once tireless body now trembled with weakness, and his voice faded to a hoarse whisper. When he summoned the strength to be carried out to greet his troops one last time, the sight shocked them. The conqueror, who had led them through deserts and over mountains, now sat slumped in a litter, unable to speak. Ancient accounts describe soldiers filing past in silence, many weeping openly, each taking his hand in farewell. It was a living funeral, and Alexander, trapped inside his failing body, knew it. The oppressive heat of Babylon turned his sick room into a place of slow suffocation. Sweat soaked the linens which clung damply to his fevered skin. The air reeked of stale wine, fever, and unwashed bodies, not just his own, but those of the attendants who rarely left his side. Outside, the sun baked the mud brick walls until they radiated heat inward, trapping the sickness inside with him. Even the palace's wide windows and courtyards offered no relief. The smell of illness clung to everything it touched. His physicians applied every method known to them: cooling baths to draw out the fever, poultices of crushed herbs, draughts of wine mixed with plant extracts. When these failed, they resorted to ritual and incantation, hoping the gods might intervene where medicine could not. None of it worked. Some feared to risk bolder measures, because in Macedon, a doctor who failed the king could be executed. Others stood back entirely, unwilling to have their names tied to the fate of the man the world called invincible. The heat and his failing body made sleep elusive. At night, he drifted in and out of consciousness, the flicker of oil lamps painting his face in gold and shadow. Attendants sponged his skin with cool water, only for the fever to return minutes later. At times, he murmured for his companions, and they came, sitting silently at his side. There were no roars of command now, only the sound of labored breathing and the slow scrape of sandals across the floor. On one of the final days he was seen in public, he ordered himself carried to the river to watch the preparations for the Arabian fleet. Witnesses later said he sat motionless, wrapped in a cloak against the heat he could no longer bear, his gaze fixed on the ships as if willing himself to be among them. Those present understood they were watching a farewell, though no one dared to say it out loud. The longer he remained ill, the more the palace became a place of uneasy waiting. Messengers moved between chambers with guarded expressions, their words carefully chosen so as not to appear to hasten the king's end. Generals lingered in corners, their conversations hushed when a familiar step approached. The empire stretched from Egypt to the Indus, but now its fate seemed balanced on the rise and fall of a man's breath. On one of the last occasions he appeared before his army, he was carried on a litter through the ranks. Thousands of men stood in silence, each filing past to take his hand. Some wept, others simply bowed their heads, but they all knew they were seeing the man who had led them across the world for the final time. It was as if the empire itself had paused, holding its breath in that moment. In his final weeks, Alexander endured an illness that baffled those around him. Ancient accounts describe a fever that refused to break, waves of abdominal pain, and a gradual loss of movement until he could only nod or signal with his eyes. Modern scholars have advanced a host of theories: typhoid fever contracted in the marshes, malaria from years of campaigning, deliberate poisoning by political rivals, or, as one recent medical study suggests, Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder in which the immune system attacks the body's nerves. That last theory is speculative, but compelling. It could explain why his mind appeared sharp while his body failed. This, some argue, would also explain the most enduring mystery of all: why his body showed no signs of decay for days in the punishing Babylonian heat. As his physical strength ebbed, the balance of power in the palace shifted. Perdiccas, his trusted general, rarely left his side, adjusting his pillows and offering water when he could still swallow. Roxana, pregnant with his child, remained in guarded seclusion, while his half-brother, Aridaeus, moved carefully among the factions. His own claim to the throne quietly weighed. In the outer halls, generals and satraps debated in whispers, their eyes darting toward the king's chamber. Every visitor measured not only Alexander's health, but their own chances in the scramble to come. The atmosphere around his bed was a study in contrasts. Some faces bent over him with real concern, wiping sweat from his brow or holding him upright when he coughed. Others lingered just long enough to be seen, their expressions carefully arranged, their ears tuned more to the murmurs at the door than to the rasp of his breathing. More than once, voices rose in heated argument within earshot, the disputes not over medicine, but over armies, provinces, and the authority to command them. Outside, the city baked. The sun's glare on the palace walls turned the air heavy, and by the second week, the smell of illness and damp linens hung over the chamber. Curtains meant to shade trapped the stench inside. Courtiers forced themselves to stand in the heat and odor, speaking softly, pretending that this was still the court of a living, ruling king. The possibility of poisoning was never far from anyone's mind. Antipater, a senior official left in control of Macedon, had long been at odds with Alexander. Ancient writers claimed that someone in his circle might have slipped the king a fatal drink. Centuries later, scientists noted that white hellebore, a plant known to the Greeks, could produce symptoms much like his: prolonged agony, slow paralysis, and eventual collapse. But if poison was the cause, it was unlike any normally used in that age. Most ancient toxins killed quickly. As the days passed, no one dared speak openly of succession, yet the calculations were constant. The empire stretched from Egypt to the Indus, and no single heir could hold it without the loyalty of the men now standing in that overheated chamber. The meetings that took place in corners and corridors were the first moves in a game that would erupt in decades of war after the king's final breath. By early June of 323 BCE, Alexander could no longer speak. According to some ancient accounts, he gave his signet ring to Perdiccas, a silent sign that he was to assume command after him. Others claimed that when asked who would inherit the empire, he whispered, "To the strongest." Yet there are historians who doubt he said anything at all, suggesting that the story was crafted later to justify the vicious wars that erupted among his successors. Whether the gesture or the words were real, they became part of the myth, repeated for centuries as the first spark of the empire's collapse. On June 10th or 11th, at just 32 years of age, the man who had crossed deserts, mountains, and empires exhaled his last breath. But the story of his end did not conclude there. In the sweltering heat of Babylon, his body remained without visible decay for several days, a phenomenon that astonished his soldiers. To them, it was proof of his divinity. To modern scholars, it has fueled debate. Some point to deliberate preservation techniques, others to the Guillain-Barré theory, which could mean that Alexander was not truly dead when the declaration was made. If that speculation holds, his final hours, or days, might have been endured in silence, fully conscious but unable to move or speak. Imagine lying in a locked hospital room today, paralyzed from the neck down, hearing doctors pronounce you dead while your family argues over your will, and you can't so much as twitch a finger to tell them you're still alive. So it's quite possible that Alexander was trapped inside a body that would not obey him, hearing every whisper in the chamber, feeling every shift of the sheets, and unable to so much as blink in protest, as those around him debated who would claim his empire. When the embalmers finally began their work, the palace filled with the mingled scents of resin, myrrh, and the unmistakable sweetness of death. The process in that age was brutal, opening the body, removing internal organs, and filling the cavities with aromatic substances. Some accounts say Egyptian specialists were summoned. Others suggest local Chaldean embalmers performed the rites. Whatever their origin, the work was done under immense pressure. This was not merely a king, but a figure worshipped by many as a god, and to mar his body would risk public outrage. The conditions made the task even harder. June in Babylon could reach temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and without the sealing techniques of later centuries, the body had to be constantly attended to. It is said the chamber was kept guarded at all times, not only to protect the remains from theft or sabotage, but to control who might see the king in this final, vulnerable state. According to later accounts, Alexander's body lay in Babylon for some time as plans for its transport were made. His generals argued over where he should be buried: Macedonia, the land of his birth, or Egypt, which he had claimed as one of his greatest prizes. Ultimately, the choice would be taken by force, perhaps the final humiliation for one of the greatest generals who ever lived. In the turbulent days that followed his death, Alexander's body became the most coveted possession in the known world. Perdiccas, acting as regent, ordered that it be embalmed and placed in a golden coffin, intending to send it to Ægæ in Macedonia, the traditional resting place of the Argead kings. For about 2 years it remained in Babylon while a monumental funeral carriage was built, a rolling shrine with Ionic columns, golden ornament, and paintings celebrating Alexander's conquest. It was a declaration in wood and metal that its occupant was not merely a king, but a god who had ruled the world. In 321 BCE, the procession set out, a slow-moving display of imperial power meant to impress every city along its route. But the plan unraveled in Syria, where Ptolemy, the satrap of Egypt, seized his moment. Knowing that possession of the body meant possession of legitimacy, he bribed the escort, diverted the carriage, and carried Alexander to Memphis. For Ptolemy, this was more than theft. It was a masterstroke of political propaganda. For Perdiccas, it was an unforgivable insult that shattered his authority. The theft sparked the first of the wars between Alexander's generals. Perdiccas marched on Egypt with his army, hoping to reclaim the body and his prestige. Instead, he met defeat and mutiny. His own officers killed him before the campaign was done. Ptolemy emerged unscathed, his control over Egypt now cemented by his possession of the conqueror's remains. Soldiers from across the fractured empire came to his side, drawn by the man who held their king's corpse. In Memphis, Ptolemy installed Alexander in a sarcophagus, possibly one once intended for Egypt's last native pharaoh, Nectanebo II, and began crafting a legend. Egyptian tradition soon claimed Alexander was Nectanebo's son, linking him directly to the ancient line of pharaohs. In Greece, Ptolemy hinted that he was Philip II's illegitimate child, and therefore Alexander's half-brother. Both tales were fiction, but they strengthened his claim to rule in Egypt and wrapped him in the same aura of divine kingship that had surrounded Alexander in life. The succession crisis deepened. The empire Alexander had built, stretching from the Nile to the Indus, began to fracture under the ambitions of the Diadochi. Alliances shifted, battles raged, and provinces broke away. Within a generation, the dream of a united realm was gone, replaced by rival kingdoms carved from its corpse: Macedon, Egypt, the Seleucid Empire, and others. Yet in Alexandria, the man whose death had set it all in motion was given a new kind of life. Ptolemy eventually moved Alexander's body to the heart of his new capital at Alexandria, installing it in a grand mausoleum known as the Soma. There, amid statues, processions, and a state cult in his honor, Alexander was celebrated as founder, protector, and eternal presence. For more than a century, the Ptolemies ruled in his shadow, their power and prestige bound to the tomb they guarded. In the politics of the ancient world, a corpse could be more powerful than any living king, and Alexander's was the most powerful of all. For all the power it conferred in life, the tomb itself would not remain forever. Roman writers recorded visits well into the early century CE, but after the 4th century, it vanished from history. Whether it was destroyed, plundered, or simply buried beneath the shifting streets of Alexandria remains unknown. Modern excavations have found nothing conclusive, leaving its final resting place one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. Speculation has ranged widely. Some believe the tomb still lies hidden beneath Alexandria's modern city center. Others argue it was moved to the Siwa oasis, to Venice, or even back to Macedonia. Each theory rests on fragments of evidence, local legend, or coincidence, but none have been proven. Until it's found, Alexander's final resting place remains as elusive as the man himself, a prize as coveted by historians and treasure hunters today as it was by his own generals. The last moments of Alexander's life, with his motionless body and faltering breath, contrast dramatically with the statues and coins that show him as a flawless, godlike conqueror. This dissonance between the image of the man who tamed empires and the reality of a figure trapped in failing flesh is one of the great lessons of his story. Thus ended the existence of one of history's most celebrated generals, not in the roar of battle, but, if the speculation is true, in silent, helpless awareness, his mind alert while his body betrayed him. The man who carved an empire from Greece to India and reshaped the political map of the ancient world ended up like all of us, a victim of the inevitable collapse of the human frame. The death of Alexander the Great was not just the close of a military career, but also a symbolic moment that exposed the limits of divine kingship. In his final days, as his body failed him, so did the myth of the invincible warrior king. The court, which had once seen him as touched by the gods, was forced to watch that illusion dissolve in the stillness of his gaze. The final irony in Alexander's life is that the man who fought to secure his empire's future, who crossed deserts and oceans to forge it, left no clear heir to protect it. His last known act, whether it was handing his signet ring to Perdiccas or uttering to the strongest, sparked wars that shattered his creation within a generation. His true legacy, instead of a unified realm, would be an age of rival kingdoms locked in perpetual conflict. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on all the nutty stories from humanity's past.